Okay, here we are once again in the throes of learning how to be a Bainani. 18 of Shvat, I get the date right today. Hayom Yom. The Tzemach Tzedek told his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandfather, that the Maimer, U'Mareihim U'Maasehim in Torah Or, Parshas Yisro, is the first discourse the Maggid delivered when he assumed leadership of the Hasidim. Now, I'm not going to go into a deep explanation of this Maimer, but it's worth at least knowing the pillars of this Maimer, what it's founded on. U'Mareihim U'Maasehim is a pasuk in Yechezkel. Yechezkel saw the appearance of angels. And in his vision, he saw a vision of angels in the formation of one wheel within another wheel. One wheel within another wheel. And this Maimer then goes on to explicate the levels of Soviet Kalalmin, the levels of encompassing all worlds. So in other words, if you have a world, imagine this is a globe, and then there are energetics of Hashem which penetrate every detail and are responsible for every detail in the globe, all the life forms that exist here, and the earth, and the levels, earth, fire, air, water. But then there's an all-encompassing light which surrounds it, right? Which is everywhere equal, responsible for the sheer existence of the thing. That everything, the earth, the eye, the sky, the water are equally in a state of existence. They're differentiated from by the orpanimi, and their equality of existence, that they're all equal in existence, is a function of what's called soive, encompassing. And there are rings and rings and rings within concentric circles within each other, ever expanding back to the infinite, the above nature, above consciousness, above and deeper and deeper and deeper into God consciousness. And they're called levels of rings within rings. That's the metaphor that Yechezkel puts on the table, and that's the opening for discussing. This Maimer is a very fundamental Maimer in understanding what Soviet Kalalmi means. Okay, now I'm not going to go further with that. It would be lovely to learn the Maimer. Maybe when we have a Tuesday night Chassidus class, maybe we'll learn that Maimer. It's not an easy Maimer, but it's very very deep. One circle within there. Oh, so he saw that vision. Now, and why I'm explaining this first is that you have to know what's that Maimer is about, but also that this should be the first discourse of the Maggid when he assumed leadership to talk about this. Then the Alter Rebbe heard it, and he heard the Maimer indirectly. The Alter Rebbe heard the Maimer from Mendel Horodoker, author of Pri HaOretz. Now, we've talked about Mendel Horodoker. He was no lightweight himself. He was designated by the Mezritch Maggid to be the leader of the Hasidim in Eastern Europe. He and the Alter Rebbe had a relationship of what's called Talmud Haver. The Alter Rebbe was a Talmud of Rav Mendel Horodoker, and he was also a chaver, meaning an equal, and that, a friend. And when Mendel Horodoker decided to leave Europe and take one of the first settlements of Hasidim, of Frum Jews, and specifically Chabadniks, to settle Eretz Yisrael, that's when Ali Alter Rebbe took over the mantle of leadership of the Hasidim in Eastern Europe. So Maggid, right, or Soivev, levels and levels and rings and rings, rings and rings, circles and circles, given over to Rav Mendel. Rav Mendel heard it from the Mezritch Maggid. The Mezritch Maggid told it to the Alter Rebbe, and then the Alter Rebbe gives us a version of it in his own style. That's what he said. The Rebbe heard the Maimer from the Rav Mendel Horodoker, who was present at that time in Shavuos. This is Matan Torah time. However, the Alter Rebbe expounded the Maimer in his own style, and that's the Maimer that we have in Torah Or. I hope you know. Lessons in Tanya. page 234, right at the top. Carrying on from yesterday, right? Carrying on from yesterday, we said that every Jew has a teva eloki, a godly nature, and we associated that not in languages written in the Tanya, but languages written in other Maimorim about the word teva, being equivalent to Tuba Uba Yam Suf. The chariots of Paro were sunken into the Yam Suf. So our teva, our nature, is something that's sunken very deep into our core. And that deep core, every Jew has a teva eloki, a godly core, a godly nature. As a result of which, we said yesterday, that every Jewish person at root, even though it might not be revealed, but at root, is prepared and ready to give up their life rather than to violate any negative commandment in the Torah. And he goes on today, and we're starting now on page 62 in the middle. Likewise, the same thing is true in regard to the positive mitzvahs. The middle of page 62. Likewise, when it comes to the mitzvahs that have to do with performing what you should do. Yesterday was staying away from what you shouldn't do. Today, performing what you should do. Every Jew has a nature, a core, a godly core, and every Jew is prepared and ready to lisgaver, to strengthen oneself, ka'arya, like a lion, b'gavura v'oimetz halev, with the strength and the strongness of the heart, neged ha'yetzer, against the yetzer hara, hamachavit as gufay, which makes the body heavy, umapel olov etzla, and causes a sloth. I know a good translation by moving my body back and forth, and causes a sloth, which comes from the Yesod ha'offer. It comes from the Yesod, remember the 4 Yesodos, fire, earth, air, and water. And the earth is the one that's down, the lowest, that comes from the Yesod ha'offer, shebenefesh habahamis, of the animal soul. Remember, each of the 4 has a corresponding Yesod in the holiness, the realm of the Yetzer Tov as well. If we just make this one, sloth, downtrodden, low, the earth, right? That's the feeling of the offer, the dirt of the Nefesh Bahamas. The dirt of the Nefesh Elokis, or the Yetzer Tov, is humility, lowness, openness, like the dirt is open to receive the seed. And each one has a corresponding Zelu umazeh osa Elokim. God made this opposite that. So each one of us has, as we have a core of godliness within us, which is prepared to stay away from any negative, we have that same core enables us to perform the positive and to negate the downtroddenness and the slothfulness of the Nefesh Bahamas. Which prevents the slothfulness of the Nefesh Bahamas, prevents the person and brings the body down and keeps the person away from his or her zrizas, the alacrity that a person can have, and makes it very difficult to do the service of Hashem. Which the service of Hashem requires force and exertion. Higain, for instance, example of the kind of force and exertion that's required to serve Hashem and to fan that fire, that's the abhativis, the latent fire, the core fire within us, for instance, is la'amal b'torah ba'yin u'b'peh, to work with, to really work with oneself in concentration and occupation in learning Torah and bringing Torah not only in your head but in your mouth, and to get to the point that Rava, at the beginning of Tanya, said, the Rava of the Gemara said about him, they said about him, that his mouth never stopped from learning. So there is a force of negativity, which contradicts and confounds and confuses a person, so a person doesn't do what we just said, which is to, on the contrary, exert one's energy in the occupation with continual occupation with the Inyanim of Torah. But the sages said, it takes exertion. This is what the sages said in the Gemara to characterize this exertion that's necessary. A person should put himself to words of Torah, oil, like an ox to his yoke, and like a donkey to his burden. Exert yourself. And that's what's true of learning, and also davening, with intentionality in the davening, with one's entire power mamish. So we have the three pillars. Now this is tzedakah. So we have Torah, avoda, which is tefillah, and gemilas chasadim. To connect with and to fire that flame that's smoldering or just flickering inside of us, that Abba Miseteres, here's a very clear recipe. Exert yourself to overcome whatever negativity is preventing you from immersing yourself in these three things, Torah, Avodah, Ugemilas Chasadim. And the immersion in those three things is what brings that fire to a flame. That Abba Miseteres becomes an Abba Niglas, a revealed light. The Galus becomes the Geula. Just by putting the Aleph in, right? The Aleph. When you said, so he finishes up exerting yourself in money, for instance, in the avoid of tzedakah, the service of tzedakah. And there are many kinds of wars, battles that one may have to wage in his battle with the Yetzer Hara, the Tachbeloisov and the Yetzer Hara's tricks, which in general, those tricks are lekar nefesh adam, to cool off, right? The opposite of the heat. Put out the flame. Well, the flame can never be put out. As we said earlier, a Jewish person is always ready for this, but may not be in touch with the readiness. Because the Yetzer Hara metaphorically cools off the person, that he doesn't freely give away his money in the act of tzedakah, or he's more concerned about getting a cold if I'll happen to walk into the mikveh or go to shul because it's too cold outside. So then these voices of the Yetzer Hara, start picking up and speaking up, and a person can succumb to them. And of course, it's easy because it's easy to give in to them. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says, it's very close to you, El Odom, to a person. When? How do you get it? It's there. As I said, it's there for the taking, this connectedness. You see, Yasim El Liboy, if a person will just put upon one's heart, that know your enemy, right? And know that you have the power to overcome that enemy, and to be victorious over the Yetzar. In all of this, what we've been speaking about, and even more than this. You have the capability within you. You have a godly power, a teva eliki, that's the language of the Alter Rebbe, a godly nature sunken deep in you to overcome that. To do mamish the opposite. And this is kal ma'od. And this stuff that we're talking about here, there's crazy examples I use, like staying home on a cold day instead of going to shul, or being recalcitrant in terms of giving money to a poor and saying, I already gave $1 to this one. Why am I going to? I'm envisioning. I go to 770 every day where there's a row of these, and the 10th day I already gave 2, 3, 4, and here's another one, right? Okay, so those things, overcoming those hesitations and those drawings back are much easier than enduring misuri hamisa, the pains of death. And we said earlier that a Jew is always prepared, may not be conscious of it, but deep in soul, a Jew is always ready and willing, able to, and the language I'm reading now is from yesterday, limser nafshe, to give over one's soul, in other words, one's physical life, for the sake of the holiness of Hashem. And here, These mitzvahs are not asking you to give over your life. These are much easier than that, than giving over one's life. Top of page Lamed Beis. Hashem Yishmerenu, God should save us from this. Yisurim Misa Hashem, much easier to overcome these things, holding back the next dollar. I can overcome that much easier than I can giving away my physical life, yet enrooted within me is even that, the capability and the nature sunk into my nature to give over my life. Hashem Yishunenu. And when a person who is at that stage of where the gun is being pointed at one's head and experiences that gets a person like immediately in touch with the ava, the love, and the ratzon, and the will that a person has innately, to never be separated from God's oneness. Even for a second. And to bow down to Aveda Zorah. How much more so? How much more so if this you realize that in doing this little act of pushing yourself beyond what you're capable of doing, not only is it good for you, because it strengthens a connection and brings to consciousness or to awareness or to revelation the love that's hidden within you, it also brings you close and front and center and and you're bound up with the Ratzon Elyon, with God's love, with the supernal will. God's will is that we should cling to Him all the time. And so when a person does these things, the positive mitzvahs, which are easier than giving up your life, if you think about it, so sometimes there can be revealed the Ratzon Elyon that you feel a connectivity, you feel a connection. That's a geula state of being, connectedness with the Ratzon Elyon, with God's will. The beginning panim, face, as we said, face to face. The Gilui Rav, and there's a great revelation. The Leba has the klal, and the hidden love, the love which has been hidden within you, the teva eloki, the godly nature which is sunken in your core, comes to revelation. That's a very exaltation. That's an experience of exaltation, an experience of wow. Has to put him, and when there is no concealment, in the supernal will, so then there's no separation. So this is what you may be kind of picking up. I'm kind of always on this theme of separation is an indication of of disalignment with Hashem and with Hashem's will. The feeling, of isolation, anxiety, aloneness, and all those things which ultimately bring to pain and suffering. And when I'm talking about psychological pain and suffering, soulful pain and suffering, they're all indications of something missing. Well, you know there's something missing, and you yearn for that something that's missing. But we were saying, what ultimately is that something which is missing? That ultimate thing which is missing is the connectivity, the connection with God's supernal will. Because God's supernal will is the energy of the energetic of everything that's going on when it should be going as it should be going on correctly. And the experience of being a davar nifrad, something separate, that's what he says, you're unplugged, you're unconnected. And if you're connected, ein davar nifrad klal, there is no separation at all, a klal b'klal. A person's preoccupation with oneself dissolves away. I guess that's redundant. Dissolves. And when a person is connected, and again, mitzvah, meloshin, safto v'chiba, connectedness, mitzvah, when a person is connected through his all the garments of his thought, speech, and body, thought, speech, and action, and everything is united with tachlis hayichud b'ratzon elyon, and everything is united with the supernal will, the Oren Baruch, and the supernal light. And this unity is at the highest levels, or you don't even have to go to the highest level, above. When we're speaking of the way that things are above the way we perceive them as separate, higher than or deeper than, we can talk about this in the world, we can talk about it in consciousness. In the world, things appear to be separate, one from each other, but we know, we've learned it, and I think at this point we've also experienced some of it, that ultimately, not ultimately, but at a deeper level, at a higher level, everything is always connected. And that always state of all connectedness, of all things being connected, is nitzchi. It's eternal. It's what goes on. That's God's presence. That's God's eternal presence. Because God himself, may he be blessed, and his will is higher than, or as I always translate it, deeper than time. Time are moments in time, but God at his deeper level, and he creates those moments in time. He creates time, right? Shana, year, is milashon shinui, change. He creates the experience of separate blocks of time and separate blocks of space. But at a deeper level, Hashem echad. Hashem is one, and Hashem is miyuchad. He is a singular unity. So that's higher than time and higher than place. And also the revelation of his will in his speech, shehi ha-Torah, which is the Torah, that's also nitzchi. Ukamashikosev, as is written, it's a pasuk in Yeshayahu, that the word of Hashem stands forever, and his words are living and extant all the time, forever. And if a person were to connect with Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasodim, give oneself over and move oneself away from the lowness, the negativity that holds one back, whatever that is, or however great or minuscule that may is, and just exerts oneself, right? That's the word we use. Oisik becomes oisik, and just exerts oneself to do this. Then, as we've quoted earlier from the Rebbe, from the Alter Rebbe, and really from Chazal, that a practice, if you practice this, your practice becomes second nature, like the practice of everything. And if you practice this, then you've closed the gap, and there's no space for negativity or bitterness, but rather you're connected with Lamayla Matam Vadas. You're connected with that which is higher than reason, higher than time, higher than place. You're connected with, in that whatever way, in whatever degree it is at any moment that you're doing it, with the infinite itself. And that's today's Tanya. So, I mean, in sum, we had this conversation yesterday, and it actually went on in a little bit in the Daily Tanya. How come we got a little clarification in Moranos that people don't always act like the way we're talking here on the page. And I think we've got the words today and from yesterday and today's Tanya to tell us why, because not everybody is in contact with it. And, you know, in the meshul of the plane going down and people saying Shema, an event like that can bring it out, right? But it's there in your Teva Eliki, in our godly nature, and every Jew is prepared for this, but who knows what circumstance it will be that will bring it out. It can be experience that I've had, and I know other people have had experience of just so much disconnect that you just cry out and say, help me somewhere, help. And that can be the beginning back. But that everyone is blessed with that awareness is not the case. So, but you should know at least the starting point, everybody, we all have in common, that is there for the taking. It's there for the awakening. And we can do things today we're understanding. We don't need to have a gun pointed at our head. We can do little things in Torah, avoid and every little thing will bring us back to and begin to flame up that small flame of the Ava, which is hidden in each and every one of us.
He's also talking about the extraordinary exertion that can bring you to a certain heights where you're feeling you're riding on on the power of Torah.
Absolutely. I mean, I often think of it as just, I look at it as calisthenics. The more you exert yourself, the more you add the poundage to the weight you're lifting, the more capability you have.
Training. It's training.
Training, practice, building blocks, one step after another. Take the steps that you can take that are different from the steps that someone else can take. Someone's working with a 5-pound weight, someone's with a 100-pound weight, but they didn't get to the 100 pounds right away, right? Build it up, exertion. That was one of the words on the matriach, one of the words in the Tanya today. Exert yourself. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you feel overworked, and it's a good time to remember this.
Yeah. Well, you've got to know yourself, and most people do,
Sarah, you always want to do more.
Okay, Sarah, come up, Sarah from Kew Garden Hills. That's you come up. Go ahead.
Hi. Good morning. I love the examples that the Rebbe uses. One, because, they're so down to earth and relatable and common. And also because they kind of are based on the feeling of fear, like I don't have enough money to give, or it's cold and I'm going to get sick.
Right.
So I feel like there's two dynamics of fear, and there's a godly fear, and then there's this other fear, which is limiting belief and allowing our, allowing these little things that don't let us take risks and stretch ourselves and step into the unknown. And have faith that there's a higher power supporting us. And I learned recently that, because I guess in this last week's Parsha, somehow Hashem's 72 names are coded in the Psukim. And I learned that one of the Hashem's 72 names is Resh Aleph Hey, Resh Aleph Hey, right? Which is the root of the word fear and seeing. And I know we've had so many discussions about fear and what does it mean. And I think when we can step outside of our small mundane fears, like the ones Rebbe mentioned, and step into I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a really strong feeling that this is the right thing to do. That's when it turns into that awe. And it allows us to stretch and experience Hashem's hand, because we don't know. We can't control everything in those scenarios.
Very good. Nice. Ubechein, what are we going to do? Well, someone else has a hand up here. Oh, no, it's just the number that says that there's one hand up. Ubechein, lochein. Therefore, today, what?
So if I have a calling to do something, whether it's reach out to someone that I haven't spoken to, or, do something that feels uncomfortable, but I know it could be helpful to another person, even if I'm I don't know what I'm going to say, or I don't think I'm going to have enough time to really stretch myself to do it. And for to connect closer with Hashem and to bring myself to new connection.
New connections. Make a little new connection. Good. Beautiful. And if nobody else, then we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a safe flight.
Thank you.